Well, hello, everyone. My name is Brian Ballantyne, one of the podcast members here at Connected by Community, brought to you by Ballantyne Capital Advisors. I just want to take a moment and thank everyone for listening, sharing, liking our podcast, and allowing us to share with you more about our community. And I want to take a special moment to thank our sponsors for allowing us to partner with them and continue to bring you these nonprofits, community interest, business leaders in our community and what they're doing for and in our community. I'd ask you to check them out. They allow us to continue to bring this to you. And if you or someone you know would like to know more about becoming one of those partners with us, check out our website, connectedbycommunity.org. There you'll find a sponsorship tab, and we can get you more information on that. Until we see you next time, go out and make our community great. Well, welcome everyone to this edition of Connected by Community, a podcast brought to you by Ballantyne Capital Advisors. And we're here today with a third-time guest, the one and only. We've only had this one time, so I want to have a drum roll. If we had a drum roll, I don't have that. Mr. Eric Stein from East Bay Investment Solutions. Eric, thanks for joining us today.
Of course, Brian. Glad to be back for the third time.
Absolutely, absolutely. So we wanted you here because we wanted to cover a interesting topic that's been out there a lot. It's kind of technical. We're going to try to keep it conversational, but certainly we get questions about this, and I think some people in the community have that. As a matter of background, other folks have seen you, some haven't. But if you don't mind, maybe just a quick introduction of yourself and kind of what you do and who you are and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, sure. I appreciate that. As you said, I'm with East Bay Investment Solutions. It's a firm that I'm a partner in with. I have another partner based in Charleston, South Carolina, Mario Nardone. We are both CFA charter holders, and we are what you would refer to as an OCIO, or outsourced chief investment officer. And we work with firms like Ballantyne Capital Advisors to support advisors on the investment front.
Awesome. Well, I know I can speak for myself and the audience that doesn't know Eric. Really smart guy, knows a lot, brings a lot of value to his clients and certainly to us. So we're just glad to have him here today to talk about this currency thing. So let's jump right into it. What's been out a lot out there is what happens if the U.S. loses its benchmark as the currency or trading choice for various currency and business obligations around the world. Can you maybe just even describe what a currency is and maybe why this is even a concern for our audience?
Yeah, well, if you think about the global currency reserve status, really what it means is that it's a currency that's held in large amounts by central banks across the globe, which the US dollar is, and that major financial transactions like commodities, for example, are done in dollars. So if you look at a transaction, in oil, for example, that's most often priced in dollars. So just the US dollar has been the reserve currency status since about the end of World War II. And, we've maintained that status through today.
So, and we'll get into could a change even happen, but if it did, hypothetically, why would people be concerned, or what effects might that have in our economy? I guess maybe in our economy and the global economy at a high level.
Yeah, it's a great question, Brian. And part of it is a little bit tricky to answer just simply because, we've never really lost the reserve currency status since we've had it. So, it's sort of, a little bit of a guessing game of exactly what would happen. I'd say one of the implications could be that, the yields on treasuries would go higher. So if you think about, treasuries being owned and by a lot of foreign currency countries and priced in dollars, we don't pay a lot of yield because of the safety and stability of our country and our economy. So it's possible if we lost reserve currency status that we might have to pay more for that yield. So the cost of debt would go up as well. So that's one implication. There are others that could happen, but again, it's a little bit of a guessing game as we've just never seen it happen before.
So what do you think's made this topic come up recently more? I guess, and I've been doing this a long time and you have as well. It seems like things go in cycles, and I don't know if joke's the right word, but I'm old enough to remember when people were concerned about Grecian debt, the sovereign fund there, I think, that paid the pension funds, and Portuguese debt. I mean, some of these obscure things, not that they don't matter, but it seems like they're cyclical. And it's like until they're out there and being talked about a lot, people don't know to be concerned. Any idea what drives this or what makes this kind of come up now? Are there things happening that has made this more prevalent, or is it just kind of the talk of the day?
That's a great question, Brian. I think part of it is, like you said, some of it comes in cycles. I think some of it is just a longer term trend towards currency diversification. So, in the news more recently, you've seen countries like Brazil, for example, Russia, China, doing transactions in non-dollar currencies. Some of it could be for political reasons. Some of it could be for economic reasons. But they are starting to do transactions outside the dollar. So it's really just more of a currency diversification. So I think that's part of why we're seeing it today. It's just that trend toward a little bit away from the dollar today in some of these countries again, and what we're seeing with China as an economic power, what we're seeing with Russia. We have sanctions against Russia. So we just know that these things are in the news for likely those reasons today.
So you talked about a couple different currencies there, and this kind of brings a good segue. If something were to replace it, what might it be? And do you have something you can maybe show us that shows us how much is actually currently traded and historically has been traded in the U.S. versus some of these other currencies, so people have a sense of what we're really talking about? Yeah, awesome. I knew you'd have something great to show us there. So this might be helpful for our viewers to know a little bit about.
Yeah, so if we think about where the US dollar is today, if you look at foreign currency exchange reserves, the US dollar comprises about 60% of it as of the end of 2022. If we look at the next closest currency, which is the euro, that comprises about 20%. We've got the British pound about 5%, Japanese yen about 5%, and the currency in China around 2%. So if we talk about displacing the dollar as a foreign currency, or having foreign currency reserve status, we really need something else to replace it with. And if you look at the chart, there really just isn't anything even remotely close in terms of another currency that's close to the 60% that's the US dollar today. So if we look even back to 2003, 20 years ago, we see the dollar was closer to 65 to 70%. So we've lost some of the reserve currency status down to 60% at the end of 2022 over the last 20 years. But again, it's nothing like there's a big difference between losing some of the currency reserve status and being completely displaced as the reserve status that people are talking about today. There's a big difference between those two things happening.
So from what I see there, and certainly what I know, and when you and I have had discussions, it really doesn't seem likely that we're on the edge of this happening. Of course, neither one of us know what will happen 20, 30 years from now. But it just doesn't seem likely given the stability. Like, what are the other alternatives when we really look out there and talk about some of the countries and problems? Certainly the U.S. has problems, every nation does, but it doesn't seem likely to me to happen anytime soon. Is that a fair statement?
I think it is a fair statement, Brian. It doesn't appear imminent today. It doesn't mean that it couldn't happen tomorrow or years from now. Again, we've seen it go from 70% to 60% over the last 10 years, or last 20 years, excuse me. That could accelerate, that could decelerate. We really just don't know. But again, if you're going to replace something, you have to replace it with something else. And as that chart showed, there's really nothing remotely close today to coming close to replacing it. So again, as I said before, there's a huge difference between just sort of losing some of your reserve status and being just completely displaced.
And you may have said this earlier, and forgive me if I'm repeating, but I think it would bear repeating if you did. What makes the U.S. the go-to? There's a couple key criteria for a currency to be the go-to that of all the other countries, the U.S. by far still checks more of those boxes. So maybe share with us what those 3 or 4 key things are for our currency to be the go-to.
Yeah, if you just look at it just from a general standpoint, the safety and stability of our financial system, our economy, our political system is really what sets us apart. If you think about it, it just comes down to trust. People trust that we're going to pay our debts, that our economy is stable, and things like that. And when you look at other current countries, they just can't check all the boxes. We have the most open, liquid financial markets out there. Other countries can't say they're as open or liquid. They can't say they have the same safety and stability and trust factor that we have. Again, it doesn't mean we couldn't lose it at some point, but it's just not imminent. It doesn't appear to be imminent today.
Yeah, I think it's a great point. For all the talk and rhetoric you might hear, and certainly, again, the U.S. may have some faults. If you go maybe to the opposite side of that and you take the Chinese, it's well known that they are, big into pirating stuff and maybe cooking the books or doing some things that we don't know. It's certainly, we don't know what we don't know, but they don't have as open of an economy for us to be able to audit and know those things. So while they may be a big economy, if people can't put their faith and trust in it, it's hard to put your faith and trust in a currency denominated by that country. I think, in layman's terms, is what I see and what I talk to about with clients.
Yeah, and going back to that chart I showed, the Chinese currency is 2% of foreign currency reserves today. We're at 60%. So again, a massive difference between those two currencies.
Yep. So what's the average investor, retiree to do? Do they need to make any changes? They need to be aware of this, or sitting there planning their future, talking with their financial advisor? At the end of the day, you really don't have control over this, is one of the things I would say. I'm gonna give you my answer to it, and I'd love to hear your take. This is not something I can wake up on a Tuesday or Wednesday morning and say, hey, I'm going to do something about the reserve currency of the world. It's much bigger than any individual. So I say you can plan what you can plan for. Keep your eye on it. If there are changes that are certainly detrimental or helpful to an individual, we'd want to be aware of that. But really, is there anything an investor can do? And if not, what should they be doing?
Yeah, I think you answered it very well, Brian. As an investor, you want to control what you can control, and this is something that we can't control as an investor. I'd say one thing you can control as an investor is your allocation. So just being globally diversified. So not having all of your investments in dollar investments, having some of your investments, as we would recommend, in international or emerging markets that are non-dollar denominated. So if there are differences in currencies, if currencies ebb and flow in one way or another, you're globally diversified from that perspective.
Gotcha. And certainly we would concur with that, being planners first, planning first, and then investment second. That helps people. And then the other thing I often say is turn the financial pornography off. So if you're watching too much of that stuff and it's infiltrating your mind, and people just sit there and absorb stuff that maybe they shouldn't be taking action on, it's okay to walk away from the television or the internet and focus back. It's almost like a mental health thing, I think. And so I tell people, just because there's information out there doesn't mean it's wisdom. And I think going back to your plan can help you garner wisdom to move forward. So very, very helpful. So I guess, this is a technical subject. You've shared with us a lot about it. Anything maybe that we haven't talked about or you'd like to share about currency or how someone might view this as they're thinking about their future?
I think you summed it up very well, Brian. Is really just focusing on your plan as an investor, as a client, having a plan, working with your financial advisor to make sure that that plan is in place, and just revisiting that plan from time to time makes a lot of sense, just to see if there's any changes, more so in the plan than anything else. But if there are changes in things like foreign currency global reserves or things like that, that's something that you as an advisor, we would work with you to make sure that's implemented or changed to the best of our ability.
Yep, absolutely. Well, Eric, thanks for spending a little bit of time with us today, tackling really a complex issue. I know a lot of our listeners and viewers may have more questions. If they do, we encourage them to reach out to us. We can certainly help you with that, get Eric involved if you'd like as well. But there's a lot to dive in and peel the onion back here. But we wanted to take a few moments today to peel the onion back, let you look at what's there with currency, what's the talk all about, and why maybe it's not as big a concern, at least in the short term. Something to keep your eye on the long term, but always keep focused on your plan. Thanks again, Eric, for joining us today.
Of course. Thank you, Brian.
And thank you all to our listeners for being out there. Go out and find our Facebook page, Instagram page, and all the other social media platforms. Until we see you next, go out and make our community great.